If you criticize Israel or the Jewish people, are you a racist, anti-Semitic? It's put the UK's Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn under huge pressure. He's defused the row for now, but the question remains, what exactly does anti-Semitism mean? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashem, Ahelbarra. The definition of anti-Semitism has long been a dividing topic. It's commonly used to describe hostility towards or discrimination against Jews as a religious or racial group. But what's considered discriminative is disputed. 31 countries have adopted a definition by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA. It includes 11 examples of anti-Semitic behaviour. Not everyone agrees on them, and the issue has engulfed the UK's Labour Party in a row for months. Its leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has been accused of holding anti-Semitic views. On Tuesday, he bowed under mounting pressure to adopt the full definition of IHRA, but with a caveat. Lawrence Lee reports.
Can you say what you want to about Israel without being accused of hating Jews? These people who support Jeremy Corbyn believe it is entirely legitimate to condemn Israel as institutionally racist without being cast as racist themselves.
Ludicrous, you know. I mean, this is a party that could become the party of government, and we can't discuss matters of foreign policy, the rights of the Palestinians to their own self-determination, the suffering that the Palestinians are experiencing at the hands of Israel. We can't discuss that in the Labour Party because it would be defined as anti-Semitic.
Hey ho, Jeremy Corbyn's got to go.
But these British Jews, friends of Israel, say that is bigotry, fascism even.
Jewish people at the moment, everybody I know is considering leaving the country. Young people are leaving the country. I know loads of young people in their 20s who've gone to Israel. And, you know, if Jeremy Corbyn looks as if he's going to become big Prime Minister, you will see a stream of Jewish people leaving the United Kingdom. That has to be terrible.
At the heart of it was Labour's refusal to accept several examples of anti-Semitic language and views as defined by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IHRA. It is deemed anti-Semitic to say, for instance, that Jews are more loyal to Israel than their own country, or that the state of Israel is by definition racist, or that Israeli government policies are like those of Nazi Germany. Corbyn and his supporters had claimed this prevented them from properly criticising Israel's actions towards the Palestinian people. Under huge pressure to adopt the IHRA code, the party executive finally did, but also reserved the right to criticise Israel. Even the deputy party leader didn't seem convinced.
So if somebody says that Israel is a racist endeavour now, will they be disciplined by the Labour Party?
Look, the caveat is what it says. You can make your own mind up.
Critics will accuse the Labour Party of trying to play with words in this supposed compromise. What is the difference between criticising Israel and expressing support for the Palestinians and criticising Israel's actions towards the Palestinians? One might not be anti-Semitic, one might be. It's open to interpretation, and certainly it is not the unequivocal backing of the anti-Semitism code that many Labour politicians have been demanding. The danger in this for Corbyn is that in trying to keep his political party happy, he will have upset his grassroots supporters who want to say what they like to about Israel. This decision may not have cleared up anything. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera, London.
Let's bring in our panel. Joining us in London, we have Emma Fox, the national organiser of the Students' Rights Programme at Henry Jackson Society. Sarah Glynn joins us from Dundee, Scotland via Skype. She is a member of the Scottish Jews Against Zionism. And from Tel Aviv, Gidi Levy, a columnist with Haaretz. Welcome to the programme. Emma, how significant is the Labour Party's vote?
Well, I think that it is significant. I think it's thoroughly disappointing that the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism couldn't be adopted in full. I think the criticisms of the definition are wildly unfounded. I think that whilst this could be seen as a step in the right direction, I think through the sort of caveats that Jeremy Corbyn wanted to put forward in addition to the definition has sort of undermined the entire process and again has sort of stuck it to the Jewish community and told them that he actually doesn't care about them and their concerns.
Sarah, would this help the party move beyond the anti-Semitism controversy that has been going on for quite some time?
I don't think that anything that could have been done now was going to, any concession that is made to what's essentially bullying designed to get rid of a left and pro-Palestinian leader would be seen as weakness, and they're going to push further. I think it was interesting that your previous speaker talked about process, because I don't think it's anything to do with anti-Semitism. It's about the process, and it is a process of McCarthyite bullying. If it wasn't anti-Semitism, it would be something else.
Gideon, we seem to be having now some sort of mixed reactions towards the vote by Labour Party. How do you see it?
I think that Israeli propaganda and the Jewish community are mixing deliberately between genuine criticism about Israel, about Zionism, about the occupation, and anti-Semitism. And doing so, it's not new, is the old weapon of Israel to paralyze any kind of criticism about Israel or the occupation of Zionism. I think that this will continue because it is very efficient, because it did paralyze many Israeli critics in the world, labeling them as anti-Semites with no reason.
Emma, you said that it's fine with adopting the IHRA's definition, but no to the caveats, particularly the one which talks about freedom of expression when it comes to Israel and the support for the rights of the Palestinians. Why should you be concerned when it plainly says that this should not prompt us from saying things for what they are?
I think essentially by caveating the IHRA definition with this little phrase about freedom of speech inherently just says that the definition does prohibit freedom of speech and criticism of the Israeli government and Israeli policy, and that is not what the definition does. And the idea that the protection of the Jewish community is in any way to do with the occupation or to do with people having the right to speak out and protest and campaign against the Israeli government is absurd. And I think that it's really undermining to put this unnecessary caveat at the end of a definition of racism, and I think it shows complete disregard for the concerns of the Jewish community.
Sarah, how do you respond to the growing criticism that we've seen over the last few hours by the Jewish community in the UK about the caveat, saying that they were basically undermining the very basic tenets of the Jewish community?
Well, of course, first, there isn't the Jewish community. There are many Jewish communities, and there are many different views from within Judaism. And that is actually the essence of it, because the suggestion in those the examples that go with the definition do conflate Zionism with Judaism, and not all Jews support Zionism. Of course, not all Zionists are Jews either. And it was very interesting, the examples that your previous speaker chose were examples about criticising the Israeli government. It doesn't allow for criticism of the idea of Zionism and of a Zionist state, and of a state that specifically puts one ethnic or religious group in front of others.
Mr. Levy, Corbyn's political career has never been an easy one. Now, after this vote, is this something which repositions him as the uncontested leader of the left in the UK?
Absolutely, and rightly so. And therefore, I think people of conscience, leftists, and people of conscience, people who care about human rights, people who care about justice, especially in the Middle East, should cross their fingers and hope that he will be one day, very soon, hopefully, the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, because he really presents something else, and he really presents a real hope when hope is so rare in this part of the world. I think that someone who will talk in a different language, entire different language, in the language of being conscious, in a language of justice, of equality, this language we are missing here in the Middle East so much. And if this will happen, I think it's almost miraculous. And I'm really, really hoping that this will happen.
Emma, many supporters of the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn in particular say the reason why you and many other people criticise him, criticise his legacy and the whole anti-Semitism thing is because the man has been staunchly defending the rights of the Palestinians, staunchly criticising Israel's politics.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I really dispute the fact that the Jewish community expressing concern over hatred towards them somehow disregards their concern and compassion towards the Palestinians, towards any other type of group or conflict. This definition is entirely about racism towards the Jewish community and is not about lack of compassion towards a conflict or any other type of other type of issue that goes on. And again, I think the idea that that Corbyn, because he covers a lot of the anti-Semitic stances and associates that he's had in the past as pro-Palestinian activism, is appalling. And I think we really need to distinguish this fact that the reason why the Jewish community are very concerned with Corbyn's actions is not towards the fact that he's shown support for the Palestinians and their struggle, which many Jews feel too, but it's his associates, it's the hosting of anti-Semites, it's his support for terrorist groups with genocidal intent towards the Jewish community. It is these things that are really, really concerning and not any type of support for the Palestinians, which I think we can all agree is a legitimate cause.
Sarah, would you like to step in here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got probably the most anti-racist man in politics, in Jeremy Corbyn, and it's just absurd to describe him as anti-Semitic or anything that he does as anti-Semitic. Obviously, there will be a few people who are anti-Semitic or say anti-Semitic things, with misunderstanding in the Labour Party, but far fewer than in other parties. I mean, anti-Semitism is much less prominent on the left. The anti-Semitism we should be really seriously concerned about is the anti-Semitism on the far right. And the best way of undercutting that anti-Semitism is a strong left movement.
Mr. Levy, there are those who say that the lines here are blurred and that the far right and the Blairites in the Labour Party are the ones who are pushing for this smear campaign to dislodge Corbyn because they know that the man, if he stays in power, he's likely going to be the next leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the real danger for Jews, for injustice, is much more in the far right wing, all over the world, by the way. Israel is now the best friend of the Hungarian Prime Minister. He is much more of an anti-Semite than anyone in the British Labour, anyone. And still Israel is saluting to Hungary and to its Prime Minister. I think that there is here really a very cynical manipulation. People don't like Corbyn because he's too much of a leftist. The Jewish community, parts of the Jewish community, the Jewish establishment is fighting Corbyn because he's too pro-Palestinian and too anti-occupation, maybe anti-Israeli. And by the end of the day, it is so much not only legitimate, it is so much needed to criticize Israel, to support the Palestinians and to speak, as I said before, in a new language which is unknown in the West. And therefore, we are all looking forward to see him as Prime Minister.
Anti-Semitism is a controversial subject, sparking reactions worldwide. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas apologized for remarks he made about the Holocaust. He previously said the historic persecution of European Jews was caused by their conduct, not their religion. South Carolina became the first U.S. state to pass legislation to fight anti-Semitism in colleges and universities, defining it as calls for attacks on Jews, blaming Israel for all political tensions and denying its right to exist. Some 300 French public figures signed a manifesto denouncing a new anti-Semitism that warned against what they called Islamist radicalization and demanded certain passages of the Quran be removed. Germans of various faiths wore Jewish skull caps and took to the streets in several cities to protest against an anti-Semitic attack in Berlin. The Nation of Islam leader, Louis Farrakhan, lost his verified Twitter status after he posted a video warning about what he called the satanic Jew. Emma, we've seen the reactions coming from different political leaders in the UK and different representatives of the Jewish community or communities, as Sarah has been saying previously. Now, after the vote, do you think that a chapter has been turned and that the Labour could finally now build or rebuild trust with the Jewish communities?
Well, I think as Margaret Hodge has mentioned, it's almost like one step forward and two steps back. I think that it was absolutely right that the IHRA definition, which has been adopted in 31 countries and by countless organisations, should be adopted in full. But I think it's wrong that Corbyn felt the need to put an unnecessary caveat about free speech on Israel, which is inherent within the definition. The definition of anti-Semitism does not prohibit any type of criticism of Israel and the Israeli government. So I do think that it's almost like Corbyn has sort of given the Jewish community a kick in the teeth and said, OK, I'll bow to pressure and we will adopt the full definition of anti-Semitism that most people agree is the right one. But on the other hand, I'm also going to put in a clause that almost gives the green light to racists and anti-Semites.
Sarah, but here's the problem here. Basically, many are saying that the international definition of anti-Semitism should not be used as a pretext to muzzle discontent all over the world, particularly when it comes to targeting the policies of Israel. So you can't come back to people and say, wait, you have to stop there because you've crossed the red line.
Not just the policies of Israel, but it more specifically silences criticism of Zionism per se. You know, it does allow you to criticize certain policies, but it doesn't allow you to say, hang on a minute, I think actually the whole underlying nature of the state is where the problems stem from. And that's really important.
Gideon, some of the criticism that was...
So, I mean, we've been talking about listening to Jewish voices, but Labour also needs to listen to Palestinian voices.
Okay.
Where are they in this debate? And that was something that was very much raised out, by campaigners outside the NEC yesterday.
Let me go to Gideon Levy. Mr. Levy, one of the concerns that were voiced by the Jewish community in the UK is basically, or all over the world, is Zionism conflated with Jews. But as you know, these are not set into stone. Many people say that we have to face the reality, which is basically Zionism is creating problems for Israel because of its policies.
Look, first of all, the Jewish communities, or at least their establishments, for sure in the UK, but also in other places in Europe and for sure in the United States, identify themselves almost automatically and blindly with any kind of policy that Israel is taken. Not only with Zionism, but with any kind of policy, including obviously maintaining this brutal reality of military occupation over 50 years. This has a price, because once the Jewish establishments are identifying themselves blindly, automatically, with any kind of Israeli government and any kind of Israeli policy, they are also exposing themselves for certain dangers. Obviously, this can be translated into anti-Semitism in many cases, which I'm totally against. Don't be wrong. Anti-Semitism should be fought. But it must also be understood that many times the policy of Israel fuels anti-Semitism all over the world.
Emma, you've made the far left and Corbyn in particular some sort of a rival, an enemy, but aren't you concerned that we all know this is the time or the age of the populist movements and the far right, but tomorrow the left can stage a comeback? Aren't you concerned by staging these political statements, you might be burning bridges with the left all over the world?
No, I don't think so at all. I think the suggestion that the Jewish community coming out against concerns over their threats to them and racism, it's absolutely legitimate, and I don't think that that is a fair suggestion. I think also, previously was mentioned that concerns over far-right anti-Semitism overshadows and means that we can't talk about anti-Semitism on the left, and that is absolutely not the case. And I think the revivalism of Corbyn and the fact that Corbyn has so much power as being the leader of the opposition of Her Majesty's government, I think means that this is a real serious concern, and that we can do two things at once. We can be concerned about populism and anti-Semitism on the right, but at this very moment in time, Corbyn and anti-Semitism on the left is very, very powerful, and they are gaining more and more mainstream legitimacy, and that's something that I think is justified to be concerned about.
After the controversy, Sarah, do you think that the Labour Party is going to come out more sensitive about those concerns, or on the contrary, more aggressive about those issues, particularly criticising Israel and support for the rights of the Palestinians?
I'm very worried about the Labour Party. I mean, the Labour Party is so split, and this is all we've got a coalition, of course, between the people who are arguing these things for Zionist reasons and people arguing it because they want to return the Labour Party to the Blairite party that it was. So this is a fight for the soul of the Labour Party, and the Labour Party is tearing itself apart in the time when we need a strong left movement. So I am very worried about it, and obviously I am also concerned that Jews should be being implicated in this fight as Jews. It's not a fight that's really ultimately concerned with anti-Semitism. It's about a fight for the soul of the Labour Party, and we've got these very right-wing Jewish leaders who are trying to tell the Labour Party what to say. Why should the Labour Party say what right-wing Jewish leaders want them to say?
Sarah Glynn, Gideon Levy, Emma Fox, thank you very much indeed for your contribution to the programme. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem, Ahelbarra, and the whole team here. Bye for now.